Hello and welcome to this new instalment of Charity Chats. I'm James Saunders. I'm a partner at Moore Kingston Smith Accountants. Once again, we've rounded up the three musketeers of the charity sector to briefly tackle a couple of the pressing charity sector issues of the day. Here, as ever, are Catherine Rastromji from Shakespeare Martineau and Charles Mesquita from Quilter Cheviot Investment Managers. We're going to gallop through a couple of charity sector issues that have taken our eye this week in our typical swashbuckling and cavalier manner. Catching my eye this week, it's been a story that's been widely reported in the last fortnight or so, and that's the failure of a reasonably large charity in the Midlands, the Coventry City of Culture Trust. Now, this charity was set up to oversee the legacy of Coventry's City of Culture status in 2022. But after a couple of years of ongoing financial struggles, the charity went bust in February of this year, taking over £20 million worth of public money with it. Now, outside of the formal media coverage, I think it's fair to say there's been some considerable comment about, for example, honours being awarded to those that were running the charity. However, there are a number of really serious points coming out of this case, which relate to a number of topics that we've spoken about in these webinars and chats before concerning charity governance, financial management and responsibility, the relationship between trustees and senior management teams, who actually runs and is responsible for charities, remuneration of both trustees and management boards, and that wider analysis, of course, of going concern for statutory accounts, which is of particular interest to me as an accountant and an auditor. Right, I've got a few questions to ask of my panellists here. And Catherine, I'm going to come to you first as our Midlands correspondent and ask, were you aware of this story? Have you been aware of it in the last couple of weeks? What are your thoughts on it, really?
Yeah, interestingly, I hadn't been aware of it until it kind of felt like it exploded, that it was, whether it was much more of a localised story until the Charity Commission as the regulator got involved. But I would echo the comments, I think, from the local MP that the National Audit Office report, very interesting reading, but raises more questions, I think, than it actually covers. And there is an inquiry by the Charity Commission. They are looking into this particular charity and its decision making, and I'll be fascinated by what their findings are, because on the face of it, it's hard to see how this was solid, appropriate, good governance by a board of trustees to allow a charity to fail on this kind of epic scale. And some of the decision making, just I suppose the chronology of that, where it was still operating, it was still signing off accounts, it was still taking on further sums of money. I think that last loan of £1 million from the local authority, when seemingly it was a couple of months after that, it was decided this was no longer viable. So some real peculiarities, I think, but I wasn't aware of it until just very recently when this has become more of a public issue.
Yeah, and I think the NAO report and the wider reporting, the wider reporting shows that this was, to all intents and purposes, seen to be a successful organisation right up until very late on. And yet the NAO report and the timeline in that, if you read it, does show that there was serious concerns, governance, and particularly financial, going back several years. 2021, the March 21 accounts were being prepared and signed off, as you said, Catherine, in an environment, in a local environment that was really, they were really struggling. And there were financial considerations that really should have been reflected in the accounts, I would say. Charles, turning to you as a finance committee chair, as a trustee with finance responsibility, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, signing off on a going concern is always a bit of an issue for trustees, and it's quite scary, because there are an awful lot of occasions where, you are slightly living hand to mouth as an organisation. I'm not saying in this circumstance, I know nothing about this particular circumstances. And so that bit, I'm sort of slightly less of concerned about, but it's interesting because I didn't know anything about this until very recently. And my immediate reaction was to go and actually have a look at the Charity Commission and what could I find on there. For some reason, the last report and accounts that are available, I know you can get them on Companies House, but are 2018 or 2019, which I find bizarre. Why have the others been removed? I then looked at the report and accounts for December 2018, And the bits that I picked up was out of a trustee board of about 10 people, there have been 5 resignations. This is in 2018. The charity was registered in 2016. So that seemed to me, you know, thing. And then I read the trustee report, and it actually told you very little. Which is I think is unusual, actually, because I think most charities are pretty good at telling their story. But you know, you're trying to work out, and the only thing I did pick up that they were working on their 5-year strategy, which obviously clearly never quite worked. But anyway, that was beside the point. And the number of staff. So I think in the NAO report or whatever the press release I was reading, there were 50 staff at that particular time. There were 10, and 2 of them were earning between 100 and 200,000. So you know, these people weren't exactly poorly paid. Certainly well above what you'd think maybe worth it. What the one thing that doesn't, of course, come out is around what impact that they have had and what money has been spent. And the problem, my real concern is I suppose the speed of which the Charity Commission will get their report out. And the problem is this will have passed. And the other thing, I don't know whether you guys have got a view on, but it's the general perception, because, you know, again, looking at these report accounts, and I'm only looking at one of them, but half of the money was coming from public money, whether it's the Arts Council or a local authority or a government department. The other half, of course, were in the form of donations, but you don't know where they're from. But it's then what's people's perception about charities able to deliver on projects, and that, I think, is, to my mind, is the biggest worry of what those ramifications would be.
Yeah, this is a very strange one, because it's a legacy charity. So you'd think in its own right it would have quite a short time span. You know, it would be, that's the event, the City of Culture was the event. You know, 5 years. I mean, if they've got a 5-year strategic plan, that's probably all they. You know, there's a limit to how much legacy you can deliver from an event like that. So it's an odd one that they had quite, you know, anything more than that. There are a lot of questions coming out of the NAO's report in particular around the governance arrangements and the financial governance arrangements. Again, it's interesting that the Charity Commission is now going to investigate further. It'll be really interesting to see what the Charity Commission knew at various stages along the timeline that the NAO itself has detailed. And the NAO itself has detailed a timeline where the significant financial difficulties were reasonably well known internally through 2020 and 2021 into 2022. One of the consultants that was brought in prepared a report for the trustees. And again, it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, but one bit that caught my eye in the recommendations of the review was a lot of it was enhancing the role of the Audit and Risk Committee, and including one particular point, the committee, the recommendation was that the committee should meet every 2 weeks with a primary focus on the current cash flow issue. Now, Charles, as you've smiled like that, you know, this comes back to this point about trustees, and the trustees are on the Audit and Risk Committee. You know, the chair is you're volunteered. How would you feel if you were told, right, okay, with the difficulties are so significant financially that the Audit Committee that you're the chair of needs to meet every 2 weeks to consider current cash flow issues? I mean, you know, it would make me run a mile. But Charles, what do you think?
Well, it just shows you that the organisation is in crisis. I mean, trustees, as trustees, you do have to step up to the plate when things go wrong, but that's not a sustainable thing for any length of time. I mean, you know, trustees are volunteers; they're doing it out of their time, goodness of their heart, in the best will, etc. And you know, that can only ever be a very, very short-term situation.
And this report and these recommendations were from, I believe, 2021. It's not like they've been done in hindsight now. They were in the right, you know, they were in the throes of the first difficulties, if you like, that they had.
I mean, I suppose the issue is I mean, I suspect what's happened is that the expectation from funding from non-government was way beyond what was ever going to be delivered, and possibly not realistic. I mean, I don't know the circumstances here, but that's what I'm sort of slightly reading behind it. And people were slightly disillusioned by it. I mean, I assume what they were trying to do was to, you know, set up the City of Culture and then carry on with various activities going forward. But at some point you've got to put some commercial sense into it, haven't you? That people have got to want it. You can't just foist it on people and then actually it's not what people want. So I don't know how you get that balance there. And I don't know how much insecurity was around public funding. So, you know, this charity had been set up, but actually what was the ongoing promise from the local authority, from government, from the Arts Council about the ongoing financial support? And again, we don't know the answer to that question, but again, I suspect it was probably pretty flimsy, and people are living, you know, hand to mouth.
Yeah. Catherine, any final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because there are other cities of culture. So Hull has done it, Liverpool has done it. We haven't seen the big stories there to say, you know, the charity crashed and burned. And I think that recommendation of a committee meeting every fortnight is ridiculous unless that charity is in financial crisis. Now, this one did end up being in financial crisis, but I'll be fascinated whether these trustees made serious incident reports to the Charity Commission in a timely manner, according to the information they had at the relevant time. I think there's a whole missing piece here, but I do think it's just quite shocking. And I would agree with your point, Charles. I think, you know, when it's an issue of public trust and confidence in charities, the average person would read an article like this and think, don't give charities money. They don't know how to manage it. They don't do a good job. You're throwing good money after bad. But also for the trustees, if I was sitting as a trustee saying, do you accept this £1 million additional loan? My answer would be no, because you've given us 20 already. We still can't make a success of this. So something has to happen, I think, for there to be accountability either at local government, central government, Arts Council funding, auditors, Charity Commission reporting. Something hasn't worked here. But whether that report from the Charity Commission takes such a long time to come through that everybody just says this is a COVID hangover, because there's a lot of the criticism is audience numbers were down because of COVID. But I don't think you can really cover this off and say it was purely that one issue. I think there's more.
It's a combination, yes, absolutely. So just linked to that, and this is an article that Charles circulated to us all a week or so ago. The civil society is reporting that there's some research into the Charity Commission itself has been published this week. And the gist of it was firstly that there is stability in the public perception of charities. So Catherine, speaking to your point just now about, you know, confidence in charities, charities still have the confidence of the public. It's ever so slightly increased on last year, and from a pretty good. And he said only doctors were ranked higher in perceived trustworthiness of the public. But on the flip side, more than half of the general public has very little real knowledge or understanding of the Charity Commission, under half having heard of the Charity Commission. And this then goes to our point that we've covered previously about there is no wider overall sector representation. And it just come to light in a few stories this week, I think, and a few different organisations putting out review pieces. But it's still the same problem, isn't it? That the sector does not speak and is not represented by one body. Catherine, can I come to you first on that?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think some of the stories were saying it was a new era for charities. And I was reading it saying, oh, what's new about this? This is same old. You're doing this survey again. I don't know who you ask, but these people don't often, they're not informed. But I think my issue is how many people actually have heard of the Charity Commission and could tell you what it does. Because if you haven't got knowledge of or trust and confidence in the regulator, how do you then have confidence in those that are regulated by it? So for me, it's all kind of so interconnected that I don't think you can assess one thing without assessing another. But I thought some of the challenges that it was saying that charities face, we know this has always been the case, but there weren't really any suggestions for how do we get in front of this? How do we make it better? But I think what we've talked about before is charities storytelling better to make people aware in their local community. This is what we do for you. These are the services that we provide.
Charles, anything else on that?
Yeah, I just one thing that's quite interesting, only because I was sad enough to look it up, of how much the Charity Commission effectively their funding in 2008, which I think is £1 million more than they're getting today. So effectively they've had a 50% cut in funding. So I think one needs to be careful of our expectation of what the Charity Commission is able to do.
You're talking in real terms, Charles.
In real terms, sorry, yes, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out, as if you allow for inflation. So I think we just need to be careful. But the other thing that really worries me, and I think I was sitting in the Charity Commission, of course, of what's happened with Thames Water and regulation going around there. I think the public is going to be pretty unforgiving about poor regulation across the board, and I think that the Charity Commission will be open to that. That said, I think that under the new chair, I think I have said this before, I think there has been a different tone being set, which I would applaud. I think it's really good news, and I think they are trying to go out there and be much more collaborative, but with the full understanding that they are a regulator. So fundamentally, I think they do a good job. I think how important is it for the public to know? I don't know. I think the expectation for them to know is quite a difficult one, because I'm not sure that they actually know anything about any regulation or who governs them or how it works.
I suppose in a way, as a regulator, if people don't know about them, it's possibly a good thing in that there aren't the scandals that they have to regulate over. However, the point right from the start was it's the body that speaks for the sector, isn't it? That's the bit that's missing. They might well be a good regulator. They're not a good promoter of the sector.
But I'm not sure that's their job, though, is it?
Where is the job? Yeah, whose job is it?
Well, I've always thought that should be a collaborative work of the umbrella organisations led by NCBO, and if that's not happening, then the sector's voice is not being listened to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for joining us this week. I do hope you found this 15 minutes or so useful, and please do get in touch if anything strikes a chord with you, or indeed if you have any suggestions for subjects you'd like to be covered in the future, or any opinions on our ramblings. But otherwise, thanks for your attention, and see you next time.